Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of VOX VOMITUS. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, Pretty Ugly, and the very recently released The Japanese Vox and Other Stories. Joining me today, as always, is my VOX VOMITUS vixen, Allison Martine, author of the BIRDBOX, which includes Dibs Since September, Move On Melinda, and Climb the Salmon Ladder. We have an incredible guest today. Before I get there, I'm doing a quick shout out, and they all know I'm going to do this. I need to thank my friend and fan, Renee Michelle Hughes, for painting this portrait of my dog, Lord Tubby. I just received it yesterday. It is not framed yet, but she is lovely. She's lovely. So.
And that does look like Tubby. If anybody isn't following Jen's Instagram, which is 90% Tubby.
It's 90% Tubby and 10% Vox Vomitus posts. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while I do a selfie so people realize I have not been kidnapped.
And are not a dog.
And I'm not an actual,
it's like the dog is not
actual dog. Correct. But we have one of our favorite guests returning to us today, Amber Garza. We had her very recently for her last book, but she pumps out books like nobody's business. And I know that's scheduling stuff, and that's not necessarily her choice. In a Quiet Town released, was it at the beginning of August?
Yes, August 8th.
August 8th, correct. In a Quiet Town, Allison and I just finished this. Did we both finish it yesterday?
Mm-hmm. I finished it in pickup line.
Oh, I know we're very fresh off of this. So, Amber, welcome back to VOX Vomitus. You look gorgeous as always. Thank you for being here for In a Quiet Town. Tell maybe our new viewers, even our returning viewers, a little bit about yourself, and then a little bit about this book that right before we went live, Allison and I were both screaming about very specific things that are so good.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Amber Garza. I'm the author of 4 thrillers. My first one was When I Was You, and then this is my most recent, In a Quiet Town, which is about a woman whose estranged adult daughter goes missing. Nobody believes her. They think her daughter just took off. She's an adult. She can do that. But then a mysterious man approaches her saying he is her daughter's fiance, a fiance she knew nothing about, and she decides to trust him, and they're going to try to find her daughter together.
I love the words she just decided to trust him. So,
dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. I will say, even before we get to like you talking about yourself, you described this character as the mysterious maybe fiance, as a Milo Ventimiglia type. Mm-hmm. And come on, as I'm like lurching towards the camera. I mean,
he's from my hometown, everybody.
Oh, he is?
What?
Anaheim. He actually went to the same high school as some people I know, but not necessarily at the same time. But yeah, I mean, I will claim
6
him.
Degrees of Milo Ventimiglia.
Yeah,
Allison wins.
I will claim him for Anaheim.
I mean, he is not unattractive.
No, he's
and
not.
I've been kind of in love with him since Gilmore Girls.
Same.
Then Heroes. And
yeah.
then This Is Us. And I was like, uh-oh.
Right.
So when you said he looks like Milo Ventimiglia, I'm like, I would follow him into a burning mine. If he said, honestly, there are baby lambs you could pet here, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, that explains a lot, especially in terms of like, how does this, that's all of it. Yeah. But
right.
You don't need to say
and like trying to make it be believable that she would trust this random stranger. But But I think that character shows us like somebody we want to trust, right? Like a very approachable, trusting face, and and attractive.
Attractive doesn't hurt.
But there's also a sweetness to him that makes him feel like you should trust him. There's certain people, certain actors where I go, well, yeah, I automatically assume I'm rooting for you, even if I don't know what's going on. And others where I'm like, well, you're the bad guy. Right. Even if you don't even know, it's like, maybe they're not supposed to be like, no, I'm just going to assume you're a bad guy because you never are anything but a bad guy.
So I feel like you wrote this for like Gilmore Girls fans when you were like, he looked like Milo Ventimiglia, and we're all like, he is a great fiance.
And when you say Gilmore Girls fans, so you said, Amber, when you were describing this, it's the mother and her estranged daughter. So there is a little bit, I mean, we're not saying Lorelai and Rory. That's not who these people are. But I mean, for the Gilmore Girls fans, if you want to picture them that way, that's completely wrong, don't you?
Like if Lorelai and Rory got estranged and then And then Lorelai had to go to Rory's bar to befriend her again every Wednesday night. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we also promise we are not going to talk about, like, this is a thriller and people expect some unexpected things to happen. Mm-hmm. We were literally squealing and screaming. I think I just made up a word there. Squealing.
I like it.
Before we went live. And I will just tell people we cannot talk about this stuff, but this is one of those books where Jennifer and I are both like, now I want to reread it. Knowing what I know now, I need to reread it. But that's all I'm just saying.
I love that.
Yeah. So I wanted to immediately start rereading it last night when I finished it. And then I said, be a responsible podcast host. Finish the book for next week.
Oh, yeah.
Which I have no problem doing because that's also super great. And I'm like, but if I do that super fast, I can reread this before my school assignment of having to read another book happens.
You're such a good student.
That said no one ever.
Me, just no. But at the same point in time, I will say, when I figured stuff out, at that point, I wanted to go back and reread it. And I had to tell myself, finish the damn book first. Don't stop. When it happens, and go, back to beginning.
Start over.
That is not the way to read books.
That's not the way to read books. So I'm gonna frame this question. Amber, I love your TikTok and your Instagram reels. And I remember many, many months ago, and this could go for any book, you were doing like this really funny TikTok of like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. My book doesn't make sense. And I think as authors, we all feel like that. But I wondered, because there are some really amazing twists in this, did you ever feel like that during this book, that you were going, I've gone off the rails?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or like, yeah, in an earlier draft, I can't say what it was, but it did evolve into what it was. My original twist that I was writing towards in the first draft didn't work. So I had to rewrite it in a different way to get this twist that we have now to work. And that does happen. I mean, you write towards something that you think in your brain, this is totally working. And as you write it, you're like, no.
It's always helpful when you get other people, like even just physically writing it and you're going, it's not working. Yeah. Do you ever get to that point where you're like, it's not working, but I'm just going to trudge through and kind of make it work for this first vomit draft?
Yes. I usually will try to make it work through a draft. And then unless I can click it into place, like unless it becomes obvious how to fix it myself, but usually it doesn't. So I'll write it and then I send it to my agent with like a caveat of like,
please don't drop me.
And she's really good at seeing like, okay, this is why it's not working. Maybe if we flip this or whatever. Then once we get on the phone together, we can usually brainstorm it out.
That's good.
It's always good to have somebody you really trust who's in your corner say, just so you know, this does not make sense.
Yeah.
Currently.
But
it could.
Yes.
If you were outside of it and you could see the story. And you're like, oh.
And I think, I'm sure just even the process of getting through it lets you step back and then go, okay, it definitely doesn't work, but maybe new possibilities show up that wouldn't be there until you get to the end, including for someone else to suggest them because they want to say, well, where were you going with this? Oh, no, that did not. But I will say, anybody listening, it works. Whatever.
It works so
ignore the first version.
Yeah.
I cannot remember. I mean, I've read many books with twists. I do not remember ever like still being in the book and going, I need to go back and read it. That's never happened.
Right?
That's never happened.
I thought the same thing. In the middle of the book, I was just like, not really the middle, but well, 3/4 away.
Wherever it happens.
Wherever it happens.
Generic place.
Generic, third act, second act. That could be anywhere. You don't know how many acts Amber has.
That's looking at math.
It could be Shakespeare. It could be 5 acts. We don't know. So yeah, something happens and I put the book down physically and just sat there and went, in the best way, Amber. I thought, what a bitch. And I like wanted to just stand up and applaud you.
Thank you.
Jen leaves for you on Goodreads.
What a bitch. But
what
in
a
the
bitch.
best.
I love it.
Stars.
That'd be my favorite review.
Okay, so getting into some of the stuff about the book, other than we could just rave the entire time, but people will be like, okay, what is this book even about? We talk about this estranged daughter, and one of the huge themes, besides the butterfly motif, which is, guys, I put a skirt on my, if this hits me in the head, that's why, because there's just like a hair clip holding it back on my chair, because I didn't have anything butterfly, but butterflies play a bit of a role, and as you can see on the cover, and I adore this cover. This is like aesthetics all. I just want to pet it.
But I think I'm dressed like a butterfly, and I'm wearing a necklace
butterfly.
my mom gave me.
Amber is a butterfly. Look at her little wings there.
I love that.
She's
I have my wings.
But so it's this mother and daughter, and there are other characters involved that have impacted their dynamic. So just to be clear, it's not this mean mom who is always horrible. We are dealing with a pastor's wife and the PK. And for people who don't know what a PK is, it's a pastor's kid. And I know because I am a grand PK. My mother was a PK. Okay. My ex-husband was a double PK. And so much of this book was like, this hurts. This hurts. Oh, I know that person. Yeah, I've seen that. And so much stuff about what things look like publicly and feeling like you're in a fishbowl and being judged by the community. And everybody knows you. Like, I started dating my ex-husband after meeting him at church camp. So another ding for the familiarity bell. And he was the pastors, like two pastors who were married and ran a church together. He was their kid. I walked in, then everybody instantly knows who I am. And I'm suddenly under like all this scrutiny and all this stuff. And I related so hard to a lot of that stuff. And I know that the running joke, because I also was involved in a lot of like church, I don't want to say politics, but stuff that was governing the church, is that PKs either end up as pastors themselves or they end up in prison. There is no in between. Like, that's what happens to PKs. So I read a little bit in your author note, like that this is not your story, but you were drawing on some of this stuff. And so some of it you related to. What was your inspiration there for setting it in that kind of family and in that kind of town?
Yeah, so when I started writing it, I actually had a completely different backstory for Tatum, and I was just having a really hard time connecting with her. And so I had started going through a faith deconstruction about 2 years ago. I grew up in church. I always worked at a church like my whole adult life until just about 3 years ago. Kind of when the pandemic hit is when I kind of pulled back and had to reevaluate some things. And so I meet with a woman who helps kind of guide me through my faith deconstruction. And one day I was talking to her about my struggles with writing this book. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong. Like, I can't, for me, a story doesn't come together until I connect with my main character.
Yes.
So I knew until I connected with Tatum, the story wasn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept telling her, I'm like,
until then it's just a plot or plot. It's just things that happen. And who cares if things
Jennifer,
happen?
We don't know how to plot.
I don't know how to plot. That's why I was like, plot.
Well, yeah, and like, and you're right. And as an author, I don't care about the story till I care about her, and then everyone can feel that, right? So I just kept thinking, what do I need to do? So she finally said, maybe what you're going through, like maybe put that into your character, because then you can kind of live that, because I do that with my characters. And I had told her that before. She said, since you really process through writing, maybe just do that. So I went home that day, completely reconstructed Tatum, and gave her kind of that faith deconstruction aspect. And I just knew in order for that to work, it like all of a sudden it clicked, like, okay, her husband has to be a pastor, a really small town where he's really influential in the town. And then it just all kind of snowballed from there. It all made sense at that point. I was like, oh, this is the piece I was missing. And then it was really, after that, I really connected with Tatum, and not only connected with her, but I did process through my journey with her. So when I got to the end of the book, I felt like when I wrote that last scene, I was like, yeah, this is where I'm at. Like, we're in the same spot. You know, it was just, it was really a cool feeling.
It's beautiful.
I absolutely love that, because I felt like what you did was so genuine that I'm not surprised to hear that this was what you were going through, because it never felt forced. It never felt cliched. It never felt like, oh yeah, she's just pulling something she's seen before. She hasn't really experienced it. No, you could tell those whole someone is concerned, and the concern is really a way of prying and being gossipy about something that is nobody else's business. Mm-hmm. And all of that, and you know, also the expectations on the pastor's wife to be doing certain things as if she is not her own person capable of doing what she would like to do, but just wow.
It was very good. And I will say, as somebody who was never overly involved in a church, though I was raised in faith. And I went to a private school for that faith. I was raised Catholic, and we were all that for a long time, but I got out of it so long ago, before I think my real formative years. So I never had to have that teenage experience that Adrian did. But I was so close to that.
Right.
That I was like, oh my gosh. So I immediately lynched onto her, and I'm like, well, this is why I did all the things I did. So it was a really, I mean, not the only reasons, but it was just such an interesting thing. And I'll be very honest, at first I was like, there's a lot of church stuff going on. I immediately, that fell away.
Okay.
The more I read about it, but I was just like, at first I was just, it was my triggers going.
Right.
Uh-oh.
Well, and Jennifer even texted me. She's like, the church stuff. And I'm like, keep reading. It's important.
Because you were ahead of me.
Because I was ahead of you. And I was like, see where it's going, because you handle it wonderfully. And so I will be honest. I am somebody who still goes to church, but I am also dealing with that deconstruction and what that means for me and what my relationships need to be and all of that. And I never felt offended. I never felt judged. And I feel like no matter where you're coming from, you will find something in this and be able to go, I can see myself in one of these.
Right. And you could be somebody who has never gone to church and would really enjoy this. So, I mean, yes, Allison was very correct when she's like, just keep reading. And I was like, and I did. It was like literally like 5 more pages. And I'm like,
oh, okay.
No, okay.
But you also use it not just as like, well, this is the setting, but it plays into the plot so much because it factors into people's decisions on what they do and what they feel they can do and what they feel they can't do.
And what they feel they can tell somebody.
Exactly.
And what they feel like they can't. And that is the heart of
huge.
Why some of these things happen.
Well, and a lot of these things also, when you read thrillers, whenever there's this like suspense element, sometimes you're like, why doesn't the person just, and then fill in the blank of the thing they should have done that any logical person wasn't. But there's always not just a good reason, a compelling reason why each person in this does the thing they do and handles things the way they do. So I won't say more on that, but I just was like, you handle that so well, because I'm tired of reading books where, and it's not often, but I will read a book every now and then where somebody's acting in a way that I'm like, that's not how humans behave. Thanks anyway, though. And I never got that from yours. So I was really excited.
I appreciate that, because I knew, because I knew choosing to go the faith route, religious piece, would turn some people off. And, and then I also knew some people would really connect with it. And then I knew some people would start it and go, oh, I don't want to do this. But I still felt like it was such a wonderful process for me. And it was such an easy way to connect. And I also felt like,
I also think it's not done a lot in thrillers.
Right.
This, religious community, pastors' wife, pastors' kids, that it's, I mean, and maybe it is, and those are not the thrillers I read, but
I don't think it is. And that was part of it's a risk, right? Like, it's a risk when you're like, people don't really, but also like, as a thriller writer, you're always thinking like, okay, she needs to, be somewhat unreliable. And there's only so many ways you can do that, right? And so that was
she can't always have 4 bottles of Chardonnay in her body.
They can't all be that.
So easy, because Chardonnay is everywhere.
You can buy it at the CVS, but they can't always be wine moms.
Right. Well, it can't always be the same reason they're unreliable. Yeah. So I felt like this helped play into that, because she was unreliable really just because of her situation and her marriage and what she had to keep secret and how people didn't trust her, which was I felt like was an interesting play on the trope, I felt. And then it gave me some room to wiggle room,
Because because then you can break it down and go, well, she's not really unreliable just because other people say she is, or is she unreliable? Like, you don't know. She goes for all those long walks by herself. That can't lead to goodness.
No, and I love that. And like I mentioned real briefly, the church camp aspect, which you bring in interesting ways. And I mean, as somebody, I know a lot of people who are like, well, why can't I always just go to church there? Because you know what I like outdoors. You know what I don't like, sitting in a cramped room with a bunch of people on a hard wooden bench being really, I'm like, I saw a show recently at our church that my daughter was in, and my dad came with me, and he hadn't been to our church in a while, and he's like, these pews are harder than I remember. I'm like, Dad, you're just heavier than you remember, because the cushions are still there, dude. But I mean, it's just that whole idea of like that physical space being, do I really want to be here, and what does it mean, and not being able to just connect in nature, or not necessarily being like, okay, this is the rigorous thing that everyone says you have to do, and how dare you step outside the confines of what everyone else has prescribed for you for your life. And that goes for both Adrian and Tatum both. And so I like that you have growth for characters, not just like, okay, here's the main character and she's the only one who gets any growth. There's multiple characters who get growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really appreciated that you had it that way.
Oh, thank you.
I have to ask, because I mean, you mentioned it. You were just like, oh, you were worried about writing about faith, even in like a, even if it was a backdrop.
Right.
Did you get any pushback from people saying like, maybe tone it back, or in the other way, make it more evil or whatever? Like, did you get, because I feel like a lot of us non-church goers do have, or like very former church goers, and I'm not, this is not a blanket thing, but we have different misconceptions of what that is. So did you ever get notes that didn't feel really right for you, which was like, drop it completely or make the church super weird and awful and the villain?
Yeah. What's funny is actually with this one, I didn't get any, I can't think of any notes my editor gave to change the way I did this piece, which I was really pleased with. She was really pleased with the way I did it. So maybe, to your point, maybe it just felt authentic enough to her.
Yeah.
That she didn't. My agent and I worked on some of it, but even with her notes were never like do anything less or more. It was just trying to make it.
But she knows you.
Yeah, right.
Make it. Can you make this make sense, Amber? Like everything you've done, can you make it a book?
Yeah.
Well,
but
and
no,
I
don't think I got very many notes on that religious piece, so that's nice.
Yeah, and
how many drafts? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I felt like you handled that you walked that line, because I will say the last book I have read that featured a church in any way was an evil cult, like sacrificing children. So I'm just saying, glad that's not the direction you went, because it doesn't always have to be that. You know, not every priest is going to be a pedophile.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes evil looks different, right? And sometimes it can be a little bit more subtle. And so I think I think that feels more realistic. Not that, I mean, I like those books that go that way too, but I'm just saying in my context, I wanted it to feel more just like what we could overlook. And
right. Because you were very much writing about a family. Like you were writing about human experiences, people growing up, marriages growing up.
Right. Right.
You know, so it wasn't, this is not a book about a religion conspiracy or any kind of weird overthink. But like, so my question was, because again, like I just always am curious, like you said your first draft didn't make sense. How many drafts-ish did it get close to this before it got to like your copy editors who were just like making it like
I think this one only had 3 drafts total. So
that's not bad.
That's not bad at all.
Because once I got through that first one, and then my agent and I got on the phone, the second one was pretty solid. And I think the second one with just some tweaks is what I sent to my editor. And then we went through a very small edit with her. I feel like once I got a handle on this one, it came so naturally to me. And I edit as I go once I get to like draft 2. So I feel like this one actually, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't that many drafts.
No, and I was going to ask, you said that when you talk to the person who's working with you as you are walking to deconstruct your faith, when did that happen in terms of the drafts? Was that done before the first draft or during the first draft or after the first draft? Like,
it was like it was like, I would say probably like halfway through the first draft. So then I just went back and read. So, I mean, I guess that's considered a little bit of like
1.5
or whatever, you know,
I just wasn't sure if the draft that just didn't make sense had this as the backdrop, or if it was like, oh, once we had this as the backdrop, that's what made it make sense. I didn't know where the changes were.
No, it definitely helped and made me connect to Tatum, but I still had like that plot twist that was different that I was working towards, and I really wanted to make that work.
And when we're done,
you know how you get to that where you're like, I just want to make this work.
I just want to make it work.
Yes.
Hell or high water. It's going to work, even if I have to rewrite everything else. Just make this twist work. So we can't talk about the twist in specifics, but can I ask, was that an original idea that you were like, in draft 1, that's the twist?
Yeah, that was a twist I was writing to, but it was a variation on it. So we had to switch it in the second draft to make it work. And we just did it, and we kind of flipped it. We made it a little bit different. But it is, in a sense, the same exact twist I was always trying to make happen. It just wasn't working the way I originally.
The mechanics weren't working.
Yeah.
I got it. Well, and the other thing that you handle really well in this is, and I will speak to my own experience, is the Christian dating scene, especially for kids raised in the church.
Right.
And I almost want to like start handing this out as like the primer to teens dating in the church, because I've heard from so many friends who have come through that, because there's that line about like they didn't really want. They didn't want to get married. They just wanted permission to fuck, is what they
right.
And that whole concept, like there's a
even I understood that.
Right.
Yeah, like, that's like a huge thing, and the whole idea of like, are these people actually mature enough to make these decisions? And the fact that you've got a character who is intentionally going, I want to make decisions for me based on what works for me, not necessarily what everybody else says. And it's like, well, look at her, she's living those crazy lifestyle choices.
Right.
And and I would so much rather have a child who feels like they can make their own safe choices rather than feel like they're boxed in. So like, I know this is not a dating manual. It is a thriller, guys, but I feel like, if you have a teen
there is some solid dating advice.
There is.
And here, I'll just say there's solid dating advice in here that is not Christian dating advice related. It's just like
good dating
being
advice.
in your 20s dating advice once you're not a Christian anymore. You can still, you still need dating advice. And
and life advice. Life advice.
You'll need to be safe. And I mean safe, like as in keeping yourself physically safe.
Yeah.
Physically safe.
Yeah. And adding to that, and this is not a spoiler particularly, but it's just the people who have read it will be like, is call the Uber. Just call the Uber. Call the Uber. Done.
Yeah.
Done. That's it.
I was actually, I'm so lame. I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited that this small town has Uber.
Because you don't get Uber.
Because I live in a really small town and we don't have Uber here.
Yeah, no, but also Jennifer,
I'm like,
set in California where there's civilization, even in small towns. You live in, a haunted house.
In a haunted house.
In
but
a
here's the
place
thing,
where-
my town is the same population as that town is.
Yeah, but it's
But
like
much
it's
more
laid
spread
out. It's laid out differently so that no one's probably getting them out of a ditch that they drove into, or unable to have AAA get you out of your own driveway. So
also my town doesn't have any bars or restaurants or a gas station.
Oh no.
It doesn't have a gas station? Where do you fill up the Mazda?
Like 2 towns over.
Dude.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
There's a gas. I could walk 3 seconds and get to
This is how my whole life has always been until this. That's why I'm like,
I
love this. I love that it's like, it's a quiet town. And when you said the population of the town, I'm like, oh, that's the population of my town. I love this. It's so relatable. And then I'm like, oh, they have Uber. Damn it.
That's
and you know what?
unrealistic.
And maybe that town wouldn't, but because I could take fictional liberties, that town magically.
No, because it totally would have Uber. Because I'm like, I was just jealous.
Yeah,
I was
I get
uber
that.
jealous.
It was
Like
super jealous.
Uber, like this is how,
Uber.
but I'm bummed.
With the little umlauts over. Is that what those are called? The umlauts?
I was jealous of the Ubers, and I was uber jealous of the Ubers
That's funny.
in this quiet town.
That's funny.
But yeah, take an Uber, everybody who's listening
Always.
to this live or on the replay.
Yeah.
Take the Uber.
If there's ever a chance, just take it. They're like $8. It's fine.
Just do it.
And just to clarify, this is a fictional town. No real churches were
Yeah.
implicated. No real pastors. If my pastor is currently watching this, I don't mean you. We're not. No, it's totally fine.
And it is a fictional town. That is.
It is a fictional.
Mhm.
Fictional
Is
town.
it
and
kind
also
of based on someplace you know?
Tell us
Well,
after.
I wanted it to be based along the Russian River because there is a lot of little tiny towns there. So what I did was I took 2 names of 2 different towns there and flipped them to make a new town.
I like that.
I love it.
So that way people local could actually picture a place, but it is not a real place.
No real churches were implicated, not even any denominations, because it's a community church. So you're not going to get a sternly worded letter from, the Baptists or the Presbys going, how dare you? We are excommunicating you. We don't even do that, but we're doing that now just for you, Amber. And you're like, deconstructed. Peace out.
Yeah.
Deconstructed. Bye.
Yeah.
I'm
good.
Yeah. Like, all right. Peace out. So I know in this business, we can't always talk about what we're working on next, but last time we had you, I know you were working, you were, teasing this and you were going to come back. Is there anything that we know of that we're going to be trying to book you for soon, Amber?
Just let us mark our calendars well.
No, I actually am working on something right now, but I went through some different, in the last couple of years, I've gone through some different ideas that weren't working for me. I shelved some things and then kind of took some time just to be with myself and think through my thoughts, and I came up with an idea that I love. And so I'm still working on it. It's early stages, so I don't want to say anything, but I'm really excited about it. But you know how sometimes creatively you need to take a little bit of a step back. I was pushing, and then I just needed some time to be me.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, and as we said at the beginning of this episode, it's like we didn't have you on our show that long ago.
Right. Yeah.
And now we have you back for another book. And that is, and I know a lot of that was like scheduling, not necessarily on your part, but that being said, it was still you putting out a book.
It was still a lot. I was working a lot and writing like 2 books a year for a while. So now I'm working on one and I'm really excited about it. But I even remember telling my agent, like, I just need a little bit of time to just think this one through and write it at my own pace. And so that's what I'm doing. And I'm really enjoying it.
I love that. I love that so much.
Like, just tell your agent, if you want this one to make sense, maybe you should.
I'd like to give you one that makes sense first draft.
It doesn't have to be perfect, but maybe the sentences work a little bit, and the plot, if there is one, I'm not judging if there's not. There doesn't need to be. Literally, just smack the word literary on it. No, so are you feeling your writing process is different now that you don't have this like crazy deadline that you're rediscovering? Does it feel more like when you first started writing, or does it feel completely new?
Yeah, it feels like, so when I wrote When I Was You, prior to having any contract, I kind of, the way that I like to write is I like to have this idea, have like some characters, and then just kind of see where they take me. And that is my preferred writing process. But I can't always do that if I'm like, okay, you have to have a book to us in 3 months or whatever. So yes, I'm back to doing that. And I'm really enjoying just kind of seeing where the story takes me. So,
I love this so much for you. And then I honestly, selfishly love that so much for us as your readers, because like your books are so great. And they're always pitch perfect with characters, twists, plot, but to think of you writing something that you absolutely love on your time,
yes,
and making it without other people's expectations, I just really cannot wait. I don't care how long it takes. Amber?
Thank you.
Well, for you, I want it to happen soon enough.
I want it to happen sooner.
The royalty check shows up.
Yeah.
When you need it. So, like, I don't want to stress on that side of it, but otherwise, I echo what Jennifer says.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So like we can't be like, all right, we're going to see you in 6 months, Amber, but you could always come back. You could come back anytime, even if you don't have a book to.
Okay.
You could always just be like, now we're going back to, because we didn't have the When I Was You. We didn't have When I Was You.
We never had that.
So we could always, in 6 months' time, we could have you back and be like, we're doing backlist.
I would love it.
And I would love that, because like, we would just love to have you back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we do Christmas and our VOX anniversary. So if you ever just feel like crashing those shows, we'll send you the link, and you're like,
yeah,
"Hi, you too." Like,
are
okay,
you willing
okay.
to drink eggnog live on
Heavy
a
on the
podcast?
booze
Because
in it.
that's our eggnog extravaganza, which for some reason always gets really crazy amounts of views.
Oh, okay.
I
Well, I
think
can
they
see
assume
that makes
they
sense.
It's because we're like, we're going to be drunk.
They're like, "Okay."
They want to see what's gonna happen.
Yeah, well, what do we never really know. We're like, did we plan for this?
Never had a plan. Amber, we love you. We love In a Quiet Town.
Thank you.
Sorry we didn't have as many butterfly things as we wanted to, but we did try a little
No,
bit.
you have plenty.
I tried a little bit. I like looked at my jewelry box. I'm like, how do I not have anything with a butterfly on it?
I don't either. That's not funny. I should.
You should at least get a necklace.
I did my like flower ring.
Ooh, that
I didn't have a
counts.
butterfly one.
And you're like,
I have is
hello.
really low.
A butterfly goes on flowers, right?
Hello, yes.
This
It all
is a
goes
skirt,
together.
and the other thing I realized I have, I was just thinking about it now, is I actually have a belt that has a butterfly that was my mom's. But again, where am I going to put the belt? Across my head like a hippie? No.
Yeah, like
I
a
love that
headband.
you got it from your mom though. That works.
I know. Yeah, I have some certain items from her. This was not. I would never deign to do that. So this is an old LuLaRoe. No one cares what happens to that. That's fine. That's fine.
Oh my gosh, Amber, you've been amazing.
Yeah, thank you
Allison,
for having
you of
me.
course have been amazing. Everybody who's watching this live and or on the replay, make sure to check us out next week, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, when we have Josh Malerman on for an entirely Twin Peaks inspired episode of Vox Vomitus, where we're forcing him to talk about his new book, Spin a Black Yarn.
He just wants to talk Twin Peaks, but we're like,
he
can
does
we
not
talk about
want
your
to
book?
talk about that. He wants to talk about Laura Palmer and pie. So we're going to find a happy medium. Stay tuned for the costumes and the pie, mainly the pie.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, everybody, please buy a copy of In a Quiet Town for real. Like, I'm just like want to bully people, like, for real. Buy it, because, and then I want you to message all of us and be like, what? When you get to the point, and you'll know.
When you get to the you bitch point.
You get 5 stars. I don't tend to leave book reviews, but I will. I'll leave that one.
Yeah, please do.
You bitch, 5 stars. Love you, Amber. Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you, everybody, and see you next week.